Hey there, I am back with another deck review, and today we're looking at the Count of Monte Cristo from King's Wild Project. This is the latest deck in the number 13 club, which is the bi-monthly subscription service from King's Wild Project and designer Jackson Robinson. This is a continuation of what used to be a monthly series in previous years with the shorts decks, and it features fully custom decks for everyone in the subscription. Some of my favorite over the years have been the literature sub-series with decks inspired by classic literature. I love decks like Beowulf and Robin Hood, but this latest one has been sort of in the works for a while now, so very excited to check this one out because, like I said, some of those literature decks have turned out really great. This one, of course, is inspired by the classic novel from Alexander Dumas, The Story of Edmond Dantes, who was a 19-year-old sailor who was betrayed by three rivals and ultimately jailed for a treason that he didn't commit. Now, he manages to escape after 14 years in prison. He acquires a fortune and then uses that fortune to exact vicious revenge on the people who put him behind bars. So that's the inspiration of the story, but let's check things out, starting with the tuck box. All right, so it's done on a smooth, kind of a soft touch finish to the tuck box here, and it's covered with bits of gold foil and some nice embossing as well. Has a nice feel to the tuck box. The design here a little bit unusual. There's no images or anything. You just get kind of that background with the filigree, the maroon almost texture looking background, and then it just has the name of the deck in big flowery script, the Count of Monte Cristo. A little bit odd to me, usually used to there being some sort of like images or extra little elements to bring things together rather than just the name of the deck. But I do like the texturing on here, and the gold foil is a nice sort of dramatic touch on this one. So definitely a bold use there, but didn't quite hit the mark for me personally. On the sides there, the Count of Monte Cristo, more of those sort of ornate finishes there. Same thing on the other side. Bottom has your ad copy for King's Wild Project. Mentions these are manufactured in the USA with a tuck case made in the PRC. Not sure who makes the cards. They don't exactly feel like USPCC, although Jackson uses them a lot, so can't say for sure who printed the cards. Here at the top is King's Wild Project, and then the back has an embossed version of the back design of the cards. We'll look more at those details in a second. As you open it up, you get the number 13. That's a bit of a fixture on King's Wild Project decks. He uses that number 13 all over the place. And of course, the inspiration for the number 13 club. And then there you go again on the inner flaps. And nothing printed on the interior of the tuck box. You can just see sort of the inverse of some of that embossing there. So that's the tuck box. Not a bad look to it, even as odd as that front is. But let's get into the cards themselves, and we'll start with the back design. And here it is. So we saw a little bit of it with the back of the tuck box. Again, kind of featuring that same very bold art style in this one. A lot of flat colors on this one. Features the images of the cross pistols in the center, and then all sorts of ornate little details, little twists and filigree making their way all the way up. I do like that the border is definitely broken up here. You don't get that classic squared off border, but it makes a nice organic feeling thin white border around the edges. The coloring on here looks a little bit flat for me, even though there's a lot going on and almost like layers within this. The whole thing doesn't have as much depth. I think maybe a little bit more shading or something would have helped that pop out a little bit more. But overall, not a bad back design, and it is two-way, which is always nice. And then a couple of extra cards you get with them. This is something he's been adding on a lot of the latest decks in the number 13 club. A little QR code that you can scan here that'll tell you a little bit more about the deck. Spoiler alert, this particular site that this one leads you to doesn't tell you a lot about the deck, but you can check it out there and see a few more pictures and things like that of the deck. And you get a double backer. We'll look at the jokers as we get later into the deck. The Ace of Spades is the one power ace in this deck. Very much in keeping with the style of the back design. You get another look at those cross pistols with the X there in the center of that large spade pip. Definitely borrowing some of that same artwork that we see on the back design that's brought forward to the Ace of Spades, so kind of bringing the two together. And then the name of the deck, the Count of Monte Cristo, and then a really ornate frame around the edges. Again, I think a little bit more shading would have helped this really detailed design pop out a little bit more, but overall, a really nice looking Ace of Spades there. Get a classic black pip and index there in the corner. The number cards and the rest of the aces are all relatively ordinary. They feature smaller spade pips that are slightly customized from like a bicycle standard, but nothing too crazy on these. These are going to be pretty standard feeling. The red cards, like I said, a little bit of custom shaping to the pips, but otherwise nothing that's going to stand out too much. So I'd call these almost standard number cards all the way through. All of the aces as well just feature the single pip there in the center. So it's just the ace of spades that's the custom ace of this deck. And then we get into the court cards. And the court cards walk through some of the cast of characters from the classic novel, starting with the main protagonist, Edmond Dantes, the King of Hearts. He's shown here just as he completes his daring escape from prison. You can see him still clutching the knife that he used to cut himself out of the bag that he was hiding in. So this is just the moment as he emerges out. The court style features these full body designs. I always like that. I love seeing the full body design, but it's mirrored on the other side, so it keeps it as a two-way court card. While I love character-driven court cards in general, though, there's a lot of things for me that don't really work as well with these courts. First of all, I personally would have preferred just keeping these one-way courts. Just do one depiction of the character, make it a little bit larger. For me, the mirroring on the other side, reflecting the picture on the other side, just wouldn't have bothered with that. I find it a little bit distracting on this one. And just like everything else, the flat coloring that's used on here really doesn't do a lot of justice to the characters. The whole art style just looks a little bit flat, unfinished, almost like Jackson stopped before getting to the detail stage of the drawing and just left things with, the shading and extra little details not completed. So it gives the whole thing a little bit more like a cartoon type sketch feel to it. Whereas I think the subject really would have been, benefited with something a little bit more ornate and a more refined style. But that's just me personally. And each court, by the way, has a small little banner here that gives you the name of the character and making it easy to identify who's who. I like that, although I'll admit I don't love the font that he chose on this one. A little bit too modern, I guess I would say, of a font. Maybe something a little bit more ornate would have fit a little bit better. But anyway, in any case, let's continue on with the story of the courts. The other three kings all feature some of the different aliases that Edmund takes on throughout the story. So I mentioned that he ends up going to prison, but then he escapes. And over his time, he in the journey to exact revenge on his enemies, he ends up taking on a lot of different aliases along the way. And so I love that the four kings all feature the different faces of Edmund, if you will. Starting, of course, right here, we get a look at Lord Wilmore. This was a generous Englishman that he often took the persona of. You get the Italian priest, Abbe Busoni. He took the face of a priest for a while, and perhaps his most well-known was as the Count of Monte Cristo. When Edmund escapes from prison, he acquires this really vast fortune and uses that to become the Count himself. The King of Spades, by the way, one of the most detailed, or the most detailed court in the whole thing. And this is one of the few cards that I think really just sort of give a better feel to the art. All the different, like the clothing and the little rivets and everything here. I think this card, more than any other, really kind of stands out as a better look at the artwork. And I wish all of them had this level of detail on them. I think it would have helped the whole deck out quite a bit. But anyway, that is the four faces of Edmund as the king. The jacks show some of the enemies and allies of Edmund throughout the story. So we start off here with Danglars and Fernand Mondego. These were two of the three conspirators who betrayed Edmund in the first part of the story and were the target of his revenge in the second. So that's the first two. The Jack of Spades is, I think, one of the most interesting characters. This is Abbe Faria, who is an Italian priest who was imprisoned with Edmund during those 14 years and was actually his mentor throughout his time in prison. So not only did Faria, teach Edmund some of the skills, educated him in the ways of the world, all the things he would need to convince people of his life as a count later on, but also actually gave him the secret that allowed Edmund to gain his vast fortune. So when Edmund did escape from jail, it was a map that Faria gave him that actually led him to this gold and jewels that made him rich. So Faria was the one who kept that secret. And finally, on the Jack of Clubs is Jacopo, who was Edmund's right-hand man when he got out of prison. I think Jacopo, well, kind of cool looking card here. I love the colors, the pinks and the blues. This I thought was a really weird inclusion in the deck. Now look, there's a lot of characters in the book, so there's always going to be tough choices on who you put in, who you leave out. But in particular, this was the one that stood out for me, especially when you have 2 of the 3 main conspirators against Edmund included on the other Jacks, but then you leave off the third one, Gerard de Villefort, who I think probably could have made a better selection as the Jack of Clubs personally. So only 2 of the trio are here, and instead he went with Edmund's right-hand man, Jacopo. Anyway, finally we get to the 4 queens. The 4 queens just feature 4 of the famous females from the story. Now, while I mentioned Gerard de Villefort, he's not included, but his secret lover, Madame de Villefort, does make an appearance as the Queen of Spades there in that blue dress. Then we get Baroness Danglars, who is the wife of Danglars, one of those co-conspirators we talked about earlier. And then the last 2 are sort of the 2 love interests of Edmund himself. Mercedes was actually the fiance of Edmund at the very beginning of the story, but when he went to prison, their engagement sort of fell apart. And then we have Haiti, who actually started as a servant who was purchased by Edmund, but ultimately at the end of the story, she ends up declaring his love for him, and they start their lives together. So kind of a cool little pair there. I do have to say the queens, as an artwork goes, probably some of the most disappointing in the deck. You can see as you look through here, all 4 characters feel fairly generic, and the faces and the dresses look just really flat and lifeless, especially here. Like, look at Mercedes, like the look on her face, the lack of detail and all that. For me, maybe it's that flat coloring again. I don't know. Whatever it is, though, the depictions of these 4 just really don't live up to the story at all. That I thought was a real disappointment in the artwork on the queens, personally. But anyway, continuing on, we get the last 2 cards, the 2 Jokers, and these are bits of the story from Edmund's escape and how he gained his fortune that he used in the second half of the tale. I remember it was Abbe Faria who told Edmund where to find this vast fortune, did so by giving him a little scrap of a map that led him to the Isle of Monte Cristo, and has this little classic X marks the spot to tell him where to find the treasure. And then the second treasure, the second one is the treasure that actually awaited Edmund as he followed the map, and this was the one that allowed him to purchase the land, the titles that allowed him to become the Count of Monte Cristo. A little snippet at the top here, by the way, wait and hope. This is a reference to the final line in the book. All human wisdom is contained in these 2 words, wait and hope. So nice little addition there. And the 2 Jokers just have the X, again, the reference to the map with the X marks the spot there in the corners. And that is it. That is the deck overall. This is just the standard version of the deck. There are 2 different, actually there's probably 3 different. There's ultimately going to be a gilded version, but there is the limited version of the deck as well. This is sold separately. It has the same cards, comes with a limit of 800, and it does get a little bit different of a tuck box, as well as the tuck seal here that notes it as the 800 deck edition. The tuck box here just changes out that fancy script on the front, and instead does this design that you see here, little ornate details. And this actually is a eye-shaped cutout here in the center that reveals that map card in the middle. It's a really, really weird tuck box. It feels, I don't know, it almost feels like this is like the back of the tuck box or something. I don't know, it feels like it's missing something. The framing up of the center I don't think really works, and I don't know, it's just weird that there's nothing here giving you like the name of the deck. I don't know, this cutout here just looks gratuitous and a little bit cheesy to me. So for me, the limited tuck box really doesn't work that well. While I think the standard tuck box is a little bit odd with that writing on there, this is definitely preferable to the limited version for me personally. Anyway, that is it. That is the Count of Monte Cristo. Definitely a really cool theme that was picked overall for the deck. Great cast of characters throughout, but for me, there's a lot of different flaws in this deck. And as the short decks go, or as the number 13 club decks go, this one for me was a little bit of a disappointment. Really unfortunate. I was looking forward to this one, and I usually do love those literature decks. So a little bit sad that this one fell a bit short, but hopefully we can kind of pick it up with some of the future decks that are upcoming. But anyway, that's it for now. My honest review of the Count of Monte Cristo from King's Wild Project. Hope you enjoyed this one. I'll put a link down in the description if you want to check out the King's Wild Club subscriptions for yourself. But that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe for more deck reviews, more unboxings. Let me know what else you want to see, and I'll see you for the next one.